This lodge is being transferred to community management, whether you like it or not.
This lodge is being transferred to community management whether you like it or not. Patricia Holloway said it loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear. She stood at the center of my ski lodge holding a clipboard in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. Behind her, wedding guests filled rows of white chairs. A string quartet played near the stone fireplace. Floral arrangements covered tables that had no business being there. My tables. My lodge. My property. Patricia shoved the papers toward me. You have 72 hours to sign these documents. My board has already approved everything. I looked at the papers. They weren't worth the ink used to print them. No, the smile on her face tightened. Excuse me. I am not signing anything. Several guests turned to watch. Patricia seemed annoyed that I wasn't playing along. This property is going back to the community. The board voted unanimously. This is my property. The room fell quiet for a second. Patricia laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because she genuinely believed she had authority over something she didn't own. You still don't understand how this works, Cole. I looked around the lodge. The vaulted timber beams. The stone walls. The massive fireplace my father spent 3 winters helping build. Every inch of that building carried memories that Patricia knew nothing about. My father built that lodge with his own hands. I still remember carrying lumber beside him when I was 13 years old. We spent weekends hauling boards, setting posts, and working until our arms felt like concrete. The old workbench he used still sat in the maintenance room downstairs. I couldn't walk through this building without seeing him. The last real conversation we ever had happened on the back porch overlooking the slopes. 3 months later he was gone. That porch was still there. The chair he used to sit in was still there too. This was never just land. This was home. Patricia tapped the papers impatiently. The community has invested too much in this venue. You need to stop thinking emotionally and start thinking practically. Practically. The woman standing inside a $9 million lodge she didn't own was lecturing me about practicality. You're standing on my land. Her expression hardened immediately. The board disagrees. The county records don't. A few wedding guests exchanged nervous looks. Patricia noticed it and quickly raised her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, don't worry. Everything is under control. That sentence told me all I needed to know. She wasn't talking to me anymore. She was performing. She had convinced these people she had authority. She had convinced vendors, planners, caterers, and an entire wedding party that this property belonged to the HOA. And somehow nobody had bothered to verify a single thing. Then Patricia leaned closer and lowered her voice. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. I suggest you leave quietly before you embarrass yourself. I stared at her for a moment. Then I looked past her toward the bride, the groom, the guests, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars Patricia had built this lie around. That's not going to happen. Patricia smiled again. The kind of smile people wear when they think they've already won. What she didn't know was that 3 phone calls had already been made. And at that exact moment, someone was driving up the mountain road toward the lodge. Patricia did not wait long to escalate. Less than 24 hours after our confrontation, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line Community Compliance Notice. Attached was a 3-page letter on HOA letterhead claiming the ski lodge was a shared recreational asset subject to association oversight. According to Patricia, my refusal to cooperate constituted a violation of community standards. By the next morning, another letter arrived. This one demanded immediate compliance. The language was even more aggressive. Your refusal will have consequences. The association has the authority to take further action. Everyone else cooperated. She seemed to believe repeating something often enough would make it true. I did not argue. I did not respond. Instead, I started collecting records. Years earlier, my father taught me something simple. When somebody is lying, paperwork usually tells the truth. I drove straight to the county recorder's office. The same office where my father and I had filed the original transfer documents after I purchased the property. I still remembered him standing beside me carrying a worn leather folder packed with records. His signature was still sitting inside county archives. Mine was too. I requested every document connected to the lodge. Property deed, parcel map, survey records, easement filings, tax records, ownership history. By noon, I had copies spread across a conference table at my attorney's office. Then I found the first crack in Patricia's story. There was only one problem. The deed told a different story. The lodge was not subject to HOA authority. Not partially, not conditionally, not indirectly. The legal description clearly identified the entire property as a separate parcel outside HOA jurisdiction. I checked twice, then a third time. The county records disagreed with everything Patricia claimed. My attorney smiled when he saw it. This is going to be interesting. That afternoon, another compliance letter arrived by certified mail. Patricia was apparently working overtime. This version threatened legal action if I refused to surrender operational control of the lodge. She attached citations to several HOA bylaws and claimed the board had approved emergency intervention authority. I read every page carefully. Then I read the bylaw she referenced. The article did not exist. I searched the entire governing document twice. Nothing. The section number she cited was completely fabricated. Somebody had either invented it or hoped nobody would check. I documented everything. Screenshots, copies, dates, certified mail receipts. Every threat went into a growing file. Then I called the county clerk and requested archived subdivision records. 2 days later, another discovery arrived. The original development agreement specifically excluded the ski lodge parcel from HOA governance before Patricia had even moved into the community. The exclusion had been recorded nearly 20 years earlier. Multiple boards had known about it. Patricia should have known about it too, unless she never bothered to read the records. Or worse, she knew exactly what they said and hoped nobody else did. Either way, the evidence kept growing. While Patricia sent threats, I gathered proof. While she created paperwork, I verified paperwork. And by the end of the week, a pattern was beginning to emerge. Patricia was not making a mistake. She was building a case on documents that fell apart the moment real county records entered the conversation. What I did not know yet was that the next document she sent would expose something far bigger than a fake compliance notice. The next clue did not come from Patricia. It came from a dusty archive box sitting in the county clerk's records room. I had requested the complete chain of title for every parcel connected to the ski lodge. Most people stop after finding the current deed. I kept going. My attorney helped pull records going back decades. Transfers, surveys, easements, parcel revisions, boundary adjustments. Every filing connected to the property. 3 hours into the search, I found something unusual. An old survey map from nearly 30 years earlier had a handwritten notation attached to the filing. The parcel number matched my lodge. The legal description matched my lodge. But there was an additional easement recorded along the access road leading to the property. I requested the full file immediately. 20 minutes later, the clerk returned carrying a thick folder. Inside were documents I had never seen before. The easement belonged to my family, not the homeowners association, not the developer. My family. The filing had already been recorded decades before Patricia ever moved into the neighborhood. I read every page twice. Then I found my father's signature. For a moment, I just stared at it. His signature was still sitting inside the county records exactly where he had left it years ago. I could almost hear his voice. My father had always been meticulous with paperwork. He used to keep copies of everything inside an old metal toolbox in his workshop. When I was 13, I spent entire weekends helping him organize receipts, permits, and building plans. At the time, I thought it was boring. Years later, that habit was protecting me. The survey confirmed my suspicion. The property line never moved. Patricia's entire argument depended on the claim that the lodge had somehow become part of the HOA's common property. But every survey, every parcel map, and every recorded filing showed the exact same boundary. The lodge parcel had remained separate from day one. Then I found something even bigger. Buried behind the easement documents was a title history report connected to the original acquisition. The parcel was still in my father's name when the development was first approved. The developer had actually requested temporary access rights through our property during construction. My father approved the request under one condition. The lodge parcel would remain permanently independent from any future association authority. The agreement was recorded and notarized. There it was in black and white. The filing had never been revoked, never amended, never challenged. The deed told a different story than the one Patricia had been selling to everyone. Suddenly, her confidence made less sense. Either she had never reviewed the property history, or she had ignored it completely. I took copies of every document and added them to my growing evidence file. Before leaving, I made one more stop. I drove to the lodge and opened a storage room near the maintenance area. Against the back wall sat my father's old metal toolbox. Inside were faded photographs, original blueprints, and handwritten notes from the construction years. One photograph showed us standing beside the unfinished lodge frame. I was 13. He had one arm around my shoulder and a hammer in his hand. Looking at that picture reminded me why I could not walk away. This was never just real estate. This was part of my family's history. And hidden inside those county records was proof that Patricia had just picked a fight with a property she understood far less than she thought. At first, it looked like a simple dispute between a homeowner and an overreaching HOA president. That was what I thought too. Then another homeowner came forward. His name was Richard Lawson, and he had lived in the community longer than almost anyone else. He called me 2 days after I pulled the county records. "Cole," he said, "I think you need to see something." An hour later, I was sitting at his kitchen table looking through a stack of old HOA documents. Richard had served on the board nearly 10 years earlier before resigning. According to him, Patricia had spent years trying to gain control over properties that were never actually part of the association. Most homeowners ignored it because the disputes were usually small. A fence, a driveway, a storage shed, nothing large enough to trigger serious scrutiny. The ski lodge was different. Richard slid a folder across the table. These were supposed to stay in board archives. Inside were meeting notes, voting records, and internal correspondence. Then I found something interesting. Hidden meeting minutes surfaced. Several years earlier, a board member had specifically raised concerns about the lodge parcel. The minutes showed a discussion about whether the HOA had any legal authority over the property. The board's attorney at the time gave a clear answer. No, the lodge was independent. The parcel was excluded. The easement belonged to my family. The discussion should have ended there. It did not. A later entry showed Patricia pushing the issue again after she became board president. She claimed future boards could reinterpret the restrictions. There was no legal basis for that statement. Yet somehow it remained in the records. Then things became even stranger. Richard pointed toward another page. Keep reading. Buried inside the documents was a proposal Patricia introduced 3 years earlier. The proposal attempted to classify the ski lodge as a community recreational facility. The motion failed. The board rejected it. Yet Patricia continued referring to the lodge as community property in newsletters and emails. That alone was troubling. Then the county records did not match the HOA documents. The HOA files described boundaries that simply did not exist on any parcel map or survey. Entire sections had been altered. Property descriptions were rewritten. Access rights were expanded beyond what the recorded easement allowed. Someone had been creating a paper trail that contradicted official county filings. That was when I stopped seeing this as a personal fight. This was bigger. Richard was not the only one with concerns. Within days, a former surveyor named Harold Benton contacted me. He had worked on a boundary verification project for the community years earlier. He still had copies of his field notes. Harold confirmed what every official survey already showed. The property line never moved. The survey confirmed my suspicion again. The lodge remained outside HOA control. Always had. Always would. Then Harold revealed something else. Patricia had challenged his findings after the survey was completed. She requested revisions that would have shifted authority toward the association. Harold refused. The revisions were never adopted. The filing had already been recorded. The official survey remained unchanged. By the end of that week, I had evidence from county archives, former board members, and a licensed surveyor. The pattern was impossible to ignore. This was not confusion. This was years of deliberate attempts to claim authority over property the HOA never owned. And if Patricia had been willing to do that with a $9 million ski lodge, I started wondering how many other homeowners had been pressured the same way. The breakthrough came from a public records search that almost seemed unrelated at first. After reviewing the investigation file with my attorney, I started tracing every organization connected to Patricia Holloway. Board memberships, committee appointments, development proposals, public filings. Most of it looked ordinary. Then an LLC appeared. The company was called Summit Ridge Community Holdings LLC. The name meant nothing to me initially, but one detail caught my attention immediately. Patricia was not listed as an owner. Her brother-in-law was. The registered business address matched a property less than 2 miles from the ski lodge. That alone was interesting. Then funding records appeared. The LLC had received significant private investment over the previous 3 years. The amounts were far larger than anything connected to normal HOA operations. My attorney pulled additional public records. What we found changed everything. Summit Ridge Community Holdings LLC had submitted a development application to the county 18 months earlier. The proposal outlined plans for a luxury resort expansion, additional event venues, private rental cabins, and commercial recreation facilities. The project covered land surrounding the ski lodge. More importantly, every concept drawing treated my lodge as if it were already part of the development. My property appeared on multiple planning documents without my knowledge or consent. I stared at the maps in disbelief. The lodge was positioned as the centerpiece of the entire project. Wedding venue, conference center, premium event space. Then development plans surfaced from another source. Richard Lawson called again and said a former board member wanted to speak privately. We met the next day. She arrived carrying copies of old meeting minutes and board resolution drafts. According to her, Patricia had been discussing expansion opportunities for years. The conversations rarely appeared in official records. Most happened in executive sessions, but some references slipped into archived meeting minutes. One entry mentioned future integration of independent recreational assets. Another referenced strategic acquisition opportunities. The language was vague. The target was not. The ski lodge was the only independent recreational property in the entire area. Then another discovery appeared. Reserve fund records showed thousands of dollars transferred into consulting studies connected to land use evaluations. Homeowners had been told the money was being used for infrastructure planning. The reports focused almost entirely on areas surrounding my property. Homeowners were paying for studies that seemed designed to support future development around the lodge. Then political connections emerged. A county planning consultant involved in the development application had attended multiple HOA meetings as an invited guest. Public records showed he also worked with Summit Ridge Community Holdings LLC. Suddenly, separate pieces started fitting together. Patricia, the LLC, the development application, the altered HOA narratives, the repeated attempts to classify my lodge as community property. None of it looked accidental anymore. The wedding was not the objective. The wedding was a test. If Patricia could successfully present the lodge as HOA-controlled property, she could strengthen the appearance of authority over the site. That appearance could later support larger development efforts. At first, it looked like one HOA president abusing her position. Now it looked like something much bigger. The Homeowners Association was not the end of the story. It was only one piece of a larger plan involving developers, private investors, and a project worth millions of dollars. And buried inside the newest public record filing was a document scheduled for review in less than 3 weeks that could change everything. Once the larger picture became clear, my attorney stopped treating the matter like a property dispute and started treating it like an investigation. Every document we had collected was organized into a formal investigation file. Property records, meeting minutes, development applications, funding records, survey reports, certified mail notices, public record requests. Everything was indexed and cross-referenced. The attorney reviewed the documents one by one. Every time Patricia made a claim, we matched it against official records. Every time the HOA referenced authority over the lodge, we traced the source. The pattern remained consistent. Their claims existed inside HOA paperwork. The actual authority existed inside county records. Those are not the same thing. The county clerk reviewed the filing history connected to the lodge parcel. She confirmed something important. None of the board resolutions Patricia relied upon had ever altered ownership, easement rights, parcel status, or land use authority. The recorded instrument controlling the property had never changed. The exclusion remained active. The easement remained active. The property remained independent. Then the surveyor confirmed the boundary again. Harold Benton completed an updated review using the original survey, the current parcel map, and every recorded adjustment filed over the last 3 decades. His conclusion was simple. The property line never moved. The legal boundary matched every previous survey on record. There was no overlap with HOA common property. There was no ambiguity. There was no gray area. The surveyor confirmed the boundary in writing and signed a formal report. That report immediately became part of the investigation file. Then we brought in a land use specialist. I wanted an independent review from someone with no connection to the dispute. After reviewing the development application, The consultant found something none of us had noticed. Multiple conceptual plans submitted by Summit Ridge Community Holdings LLC treated my lodge as an existing project asset, even though no ownership interest had ever been transferred. The consultant highlighted every reference and added a written opinion. Those documents should never have described the lodge as a controlled property. That opinion also entered the file. Then my attorney prepared the next phase. A civil complaint was drafted but not immediately filed. We were still gathering evidence. The purpose was simple. If Patricia or the LLC escalated further, we would already be prepared. Every document was ready. Every exhibit was organized. Every timeline was verified. Then another development occurred. The district attorney requested the file, not because charges were being considered, at least not yet. The request came after county officials reviewed concerns regarding conflicting property representations appearing in public submissions. That alone changed the atmosphere completely. Suddenly, this was no longer just me and Patricia arguing over a ski lodge. Government offices were reviewing the same records we had spent weeks assembling. Meanwhile, Patricia continued acting as though none of this existed. More emails arrived. More demands. More references to authority she did not possess. Each new letter only strengthened our position because every claim could now be compared against verified records. By the end of the week, the investigation file had grown into several binders of evidence. Attorneys had reviewed it. Surveyors had reviewed it. Land use specialists had reviewed it. County officials had reviewed parts of it. The facts remained unchanged. The lodge belonged to me. The easement belonged to my family. The development plans depended on assumptions that were collapsing under scrutiny. And while Patricia was busy preparing for a wedding she had no right to host, an entirely different group of people were quietly preparing to review documents she never expected anyone to see. The first visible counterattack happened 3 days before the wedding. Until then, everything had existed inside files, records, surveys, and legal reviews. Most homeowners never saw any of it. That changed at 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning when a county survey crew arrived at the ski lodge. 2 marked trucks pulled into the access road, followed by a licensed surveyor carrying official maps and boundary documentation. Within minutes, bright boundary flags began appearing along the property line. Then survey stakes appeared, one after another. Every marker matched the original recorded survey. Every marker matched the parcel map. Every marker matched the recorded instrument that had been sitting in county records for decades. I stood beside Harold Benton while the crew worked. He carried copies of the verified survey report and several supporting documents. There was nothing dramatic about the process. That was exactly why it mattered. Facts rarely need drama. Facts simply exist. By noon, the entire boundary surrounding the lodge had been visibly marked. Then came the next step. A steel access gate was installed at the main entrance road. Nothing excessive, nothing aggressive. Just a professionally installed private gate placed exactly where the survey identified the beginning of my property. Beside it stood a large sign. Private property. Authorized access only. Property rights verified by recorded county survey. I made sure every word was accurate. Then I attached copies of the survey certification and permit authorization inside a weatherproof display case mounted next to the gate. Anyone could read them. Anyone could verify them. Nobody needed to take my word for anything. The documents spoke for themselves. The reaction came faster than expected. Patricia arrived less than an hour later. Her SUV stopped in front of the new gate. She stepped out carrying a folder and walked directly toward the display case. She looked at the permit. Then she looked at the survey. Then she looked at the fence. For several seconds, she said nothing. That alone was unusual. Patricia always had something to say. Finally, she pointed toward the gate. "You cannot do this." Harold answered before I could. "Actually, he can." Patricia ignored him and turned toward me. "This road serves the community." I shook my head. "The survey says otherwise." She walked over to the display case again and read every page. Her expression changed as she moved through the documents. The permit was valid. The survey was certified. The boundary markers matched county records. Most importantly, everything was visible. Every homeowner driving past could now see exactly where the property line existed. The illusion that the lodge belonged to the HOA suddenly became much harder to maintain. Throughout the afternoon, residents slowed their vehicles to read the posted documents. Some took photographs. Others asked questions. Several requested copies. For the first time, the dispute was no longer hidden behind emails and board meetings. People could physically see the evidence. Patricia spent nearly an hour making phone calls from her vehicle before finally leaving. But before she drove away, she stared at the gate one last time. The problem was not the steal. The problem was what it represented. The boundary was now public. The records were now public. The truth was now visible. And with the wedding only days away, Patricia had just realized that her biggest obstacle was no longer me. It was the evidence sitting in plain sight for everyone to see. The wedding began exactly on schedule. Patricia acted as if the previous week had never happened. The gate was still there. The survey stakes were still there. The county documents were still posted beside the entrance. None of it stopped her. Guests filled the lodge ballroom. Vendors moved between tables. A crowd had gathered outside near the entrance road, many of them homeowners who had followed the dispute for weeks. They were not there for the wedding. They were there to see what happened next. Then the reporter arrived. A local news crew stepped onto the property carrying cameras and notepads. They had received copies of several public records requests and wanted comments about the growing controversy surrounding the development plans. The cameras were rolling before Patricia even noticed they were there. She tried to ignore them. That became much harder when 2 county vehicles arrived minutes later. County officials stepped out carrying folders. Behind them came my attorney. Then came Harold Benton, the surveyor. Then came the sheriff. The neighbors were watching. The guests were watching. The cameras were rolling. Nobody said much at first. The sheriff walked directly to the document display beside the entrance. He reviewed the documents. Then he reviewed the survey. Then he reviewed the recorded instrument and the easement records that had been sitting in county archives for decades. My attorney handed him additional materials from the investigation file. Meeting minutes, development applications, survey reports, official filings, public records, funding records, the same evidence we had spent weeks collecting. Patricia approached quickly. This event is authorized by the association. The sheriff did not respond immediately. Instead, he continued reading. The silence was louder than any argument. Everyone could see the survey. Everyone could see the property records. Everyone could see the county certifications attached beside the gate. There was no mystery anymore. The documents were sitting in plain sight. The reporter began asking questions. Why was the lodge listed inside development plans submitted by Summit Ridge Community Holdings, LLC? Why did HOA records describe authority that county records did not recognize? Why had multiple meeting minutes discussed control of a property outside association jurisdiction? Patricia attempted to answer. Each answer created another question. Then the county officials opened a separate folder. Inside were copies of the original easement agreement, title records, survey certifications, and recorded exclusions. The county clerk had already verified them. The surveyor had already verified them. My attorney had already verified them. The documents all said the same thing. The lodge was not HOA property. Never had been. The sheriff reviewed the documents one final time before speaking with event organizers and vendors. Several conversations followed. Quiet conversations. Professional conversations. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The evidence was doing all the work. Around the ballroom, guests began checking phones, reading documents, and talking among themselves. The confidence Patricia had displayed for months started disappearing. Then one of the reporters held up a copy of the development application showing the lodge at the center of the proposed resort project. Several homeowners immediately recognized it. Murmurs spread through the crowd. For the first time, people stopped seeing this as a disagreement and started seeing the larger plan behind it. Patricia stood in the middle of the room surrounded by records, witnesses, officials, and cameras. And for the first time since this began, she looked completely unprepared for what came next. The collapse happened faster than I expected. By the end of the day, the wedding was over before it truly began. Vendors packed equipment. Guests left with more questions than answers. Reporters filed stories. County officials completed their reviews. Most importantly, the documents remained exactly what they had always been. The deed was valid. The survey was valid. The county records were valid. Facts had survived every challenge Patricia and her allies could throw at them. Over the following weeks, additional reviews followed. The development application connected to Summit Ridge Community Holdings, LLC faced scrutiny. Several homeowners demanded explanations regarding reserve fund expenditures. Former board members began speaking openly. Public records requests multiplied. The narrative Patricia had spent years building unraveled because too many official documents said otherwise. My attorney eventually received formal confirmation that the lodge parcel remained entirely independent from HOA authority. We already knew that. Now everyone else knew it too. I framed a certified copy of the original survey confirmation and placed it inside the lodge office. Not because I needed proof anymore. Because my father would have appreciated the irony. He always believed paperwork mattered. Turns out he was right. A few days later, I found myself standing inside the maintenance room looking at his old metal toolbox again. The same toolbox that had helped expose the entire scheme. The faded photographs were still there. The construction notes were still there. His handwriting was still there. I picked up one photograph showing the two of us beside the unfinished lodge frame. I still remembered carrying lumber beside him when I was 13. Back then, the building was nothing but beams and determination. Years later, it became the center of a battle neither of us could have imagined. His signature was still sitting inside the county records. So was the easement he fought to protect. So was every document that ultimately proved the truth. The property was worth more than money. The memories were tied to every acre. My father built that lodge with his own hands. My mother spent years helping turn it into a place people wanted to return to. Every room carried pieces of our family's history. This was never just an investment. This was home. A week later, I sat on the same porch where my father and I shared our last conversation before he passed away. The chair he used was still there. The lodge was quiet again. For the first time in months, there were no emergency meetings, no compliance notices, no legal threats, and no fabricated claims of authority. Just records, memories, and the satisfaction of knowing the truth had survived. I thought the story was over. Then my phone buzzed. An email had just arrived from an address I did not recognize. There was no greeting, no signature, no explanation. Attached was a single scanned document from county archives. At the top sat a parcel number I had never seen before. Beneath it was a handwritten note that read, "If you think the lodge was their real target, you have not looked at parcel 47B.